The late food writer Anthony Bourdain once said that you learn a lot about someone when you share a meal together. We agree. There's something special about sitting down around a table and trying something new. A dish isn't just about experiencing a unique taste or texture, but it can be a reflection of someone else's way of life.
My grandmother was always preparing stews and soups, and there was always rice puffing away in our rice cooker. And I was always there doing my homework, eating a snack, and oftentimes sort of looking over my grandmother's shoulder to see what she was doing.
That's Joanne Molinaro, a lawyer in Chicago and the author of The Korean Vegan Cookbook. Molinaro is an acclaimed home cook and has amassed millions of followers on TikTok with her easy-to-follow Korean recipe videos. Looking back on her life, she wasn't always drawn to cooking, but she does have a lot of meaningful memories connected to food and family.
I remember the first time my mother taught me to make sundubujjigae, or silken tofu stew. That is the first dish my mother ever taught me to make. And it was because I had missed her food so much when I was in college, and I wanted to learn to make it for myself so that I never had to do without it. And so sitting and watching her do that and her showing me how to not burn the gochugaru, how to make sure that the stew turned out beautiful and fiery red, that was such a lovely experience for me. And it's one that's sort of embedded throughout my cookbook.
Molinaro started cooking much more regularly in 2016 when she moved to a plant-based diet and found it hard to find satisfying takeout options. When most people today think of Korean food, they instantly imagine Korean barbecue or beef bulgogi. But in fact, there's much more to the menu than meat offerings.
There are a lot of cultures throughout the world that did have to survive without meat, and have done a pretty remarkable job of doing just that. And Korea is no exception to that rule. Meat eating was something that's very new advent to Korean cuisine. And, even in my own household, we weren't rich by any means. Therefore, we only went to Korean barbecue on very special occasions like high school graduation, or a birthday party or something like that.
Molinaro grew up in the U.S., but her parents are originally from North Korea and lived through decades of food insecurity. Meat was hard to come by, so many Koreans survived on cheap grains and vegetables.
My parents grew up, at a time in Korea's history that was very, very desperate. They were torn apart by war, and there was a great deal of poverty and hunger, quite literal hunger. And that was certainly so much a part of my parents' childhood. I don't think it was until they were probably in their 30s where they had anything that resembles food security. Prior to that, every single day was sort of a struggle to make sure that they could survive with the food that they had. So I don't think that's atypical of many people's experience of food in Korea. So food first, before anything in their mind, is about survival. Food first is functional. It's about ensuring that there are enough calories to eat to make it to the next day. I don't think that experience can ever be erased from my parents' bones. That's something that's built into them. And so that's very much a part of how they view food and how I think food is still viewed in Korea as a country.
Korean cuisine is made up of a few common ingredients that can be used across several different dishes. This makes it relatively inexpensive if you go to the right places and buy items in bulk.
There are a lot of ingredients that you are going to purchase directly from a Korean grocery store. And for me, I feel like the Korean grocery store is often the cheapest place for me to get my groceries. We're talking about pretty humble ingredients. Rice, pretty much a staple of the Korean pantry. You really can't have a Korean meal most of the time without rice. I like to eat tofu. Tofu is, I think, a very budget-friendly item that we've been talking about. Soy sauce. Most people already have soy sauce in their pantry, and if you don't, there's so many different kinds at a variety of different prices. It's kind of like olive oil. You can get sort of your everyday kind and then maybe splurge on the ones that you save for really special dishes. It's the same sort of thing with soy sauce, vegetable stock. I mean, these are things that I think are pretty budget-friendly.
So what are some other popular ingredients in Korean cuisine? Molinaro points to cabbage, radish, soybeans, seaweed, and more. She says stews and soups are prevalent because they're easy to throw together and inexpensive.
It's very typical that every meal, whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner, has rice and a little bit of doenjang jjigae or doenjangbuk, which is doenjang stew or doenjang soup. Doenjang is fermented soybean paste, and it is a flavor that is sort of inveigles its way into almost every single dish, I feel like, in Korean cuisine. So it's a very, very familiar flavor to the Korean palate. And the doenjang jjigae is very simple to make. It comes together very quickly, but it just has this wonderful ability to bind all of the other things on the Korean table in a way that's very hearty and satisfying. So whenever I go to my mom's house and we're having dinner, almost indubitably, there is going to be doenjang jjigae already on the stovetop.
In addition to rice and vegetables, tofu is another common ingredient used in Korean dishes. While you may not think of tofu as the most delectable dish, Molinaro argues that if it's cooked right, it makes for a fantastic addition that can take on many different flavors.
I think many people view tofu merely as a meat alternative or a sad alternative to, grilled meat or chicken or beef. But for me, tofu had its own place. It was its own thing. It had nothing to do with, oh, we can't eat meat, so we'll eat tofu. Tofu has been done in so many different, beautiful, flavorful, delicious ways.
And often paired with any main dish is, of course, kimchi. The salty, tangy side is usually made with fermented cabbage or radish, covered in fish sauce, garlic, ginger, onion, and spicy seasoning. Since Molinaro is vegan, she spent many hours perfecting a new kimchi recipe without fish sauce or shrimp paste.
The biggest test for me was whether she would approve of my kimchi. And for many Korean Americans, kimchi is very synonymous with the Korean part of their identity, and that was certainly the case for me. So veganizing a kimchi recipe was a huge challenge, and one that I really wanted to save for the cookbook. People have been asking me for my kimchi recipe for years, and I was like, you know what, I really want it to be shared in the cookbook. So the other day, my mom was eating some of the leftover kimchi that I'd made for the cookbook, and she's eating it, and she's like, looking at me, she's like, Joanne, this is excellent. And it made me so happy. But what even made me happier is when she said, you know what? I think I'm just going to use this recipe going forward instead of the one that she's been making pretty much all of her life. That is very rewarding for any Korean daughter.
In fact, Molinaro is already ramping up to impress her family and friends once again this holiday season. Some of her more festive dishes are traditional Korean recipes, while others are combined flavors of American Korean culture. One dessert she's particularly proud of is her pecan pot pie, featuring a mix of sugary pecans paired with red bean paste, a subtly sweet ingredient popular in Korean desserts.
My parents are typically like, oh, American desserts, they're a little too sweet for us. We prefer something like rice cakes. And when they tried this pecan pot pie, they were absolutely amazed because it really was just this perfect melding of, Korean cuisine plus American cuisine that they too have grown to appreciate living as immigrants here.
When asked what dish she can't go without for special occasions, she says there's one noodle-based main course that always has a spot at the table.
Japchae is the glass noodle dish. It's a glass, sweet potato vermicelli dish, and it's so colorful and bright. You see all the colors of the rainbow represented in this dish because it's made with red bell peppers, yellow bell peppers, green bell peppers. You've got the earthiness of the mushrooms. You've got the incredible umami of the soy sauce and the onions. I like to use purple onions to, again, give it sort of that wonderful color and texture as well as that zip. And japchae is, a little bit of a labor of love because unlike a lot of stir fries, you got to stir fry each vegetable by itself so that they retain their flavor in this really wonderful noodle dish that comes together. So a lot of times it's the dish that I ask for when it's my birthday. Certainly on Thanksgiving or Christmas, I wouldn't go without one of those without seeing japchae on that table.
So this holiday season, maybe try experimenting with some new flavors and ingredients. the family and friends sitting around your table might just enjoy the interesting infusion of culture as they try something different this year. To find out more about our guest, Joanne Molinaro, visit viewpointsradio.org. You can get her cookbook, The Korean Vegan, in bookstores and online. For more behind the scenes, search viewpointsradio.org on Facebook and Twitter. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri. Studio production by Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.
Viewpoints returns in just a moment.
Flu season is here, and flu is similar enough to COVID-19 to create dangerous confusion. SARS-CoV-2 can result in more serious illness, but initial symptoms are often similar. Fever and chills, a cough, runny nose, and shortness of breath. COVID-19 seems to spread more easily than flu, and people are often contagious longer. Dr. Manoj Gandhi, Senior Medical Director at Thermo Fisher Scientific, says, unfortunately, you can't tell the difference by symptoms alone.
Simultaneous testing for SARS-CoV-2 and influenza viruses is essential. Multiplex PCR technology allows for testing of multiple viruses and co-infections at the same time, which provides proper diagnosis, reduces transmission of COVID-19, monitors the spread of both COVID-19 and flu, and saves valuable testing resources.
Multi-pathogen PCR testing helps drive swift and accurate treatment decisions to help simultaneously manage flu season and the COVID-19 pandemic. Find out more at thermofisher.com/COVID-flu information.
More than 80% of people say that vision is the most important sense. So why do about half of us skip our annual eye exam? Dr. Valerie Sheedy-Pallone, optometrist and vice president of Eye Care Solutions at VSP Vision Care, shares why you should book a comprehensive eye exam, even if your eyes feel fine.
Comprehensive eye exams are more than just visual correction. They can also help detect signs of underlying chronic health conditions like diabetes, which show no obvious symptoms, especially in its early stages, which is why catching these diseases sooner with the help of an eye exam is so crucial. Your eye doctor can tell you more about your overall health than you may ever know. We do that by dilating your pupils or using non-invasive technology to look at the blood vessels in the back of your eye.
VSP Vision Care is the only not-for-profit vision benefits company in the U.S. and has been a leader in health-focused vision care. Schedule a comprehensive eye exam with an eye doctor today. It's easy to find one near you at vsp.com. That's vsp.com.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints. Coming up next week.
It's a common shock that has caused people to ask lots of questions about how they spend their time and what they value and what they trust and where they are valued.
How has the pandemic fed into the labor shakeup and shortage? Then,
we really only understand a very tiny bit of the universe, and we're still asking really basic questions like, where did the universe come from, and what is it made out of, and how will it end?
Exploring the vast expanse of our endless universe. I'm Marty Peterson.
and I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.